Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if there is a better way to hire people, a way that brings in fresh ideas instead of just more of the same? Well, this new study might have a clue. Today we're diving into some fascinating research exploring how companies can hire people who truly add value, not just fit in. You know how some teams just feel like everyone thinks alike? This study looks at whether a sneaky little trick can help companies find people who bring something new to the table. The big question is, can we actually teach hiring managers to look for what is missing rather than just what is the same? So, what is this culture add idea? Think of it like this. Instead of hiring someone just like everyone else on the team, you hire someone who brings a different perspective or a unique skill that the team currently lacks. The researchers here argue that this culture add concept is really just a fancy way of talking about a specific type of fit called complementary fit when it comes to people's behaviors. But how do you actually make this happen in the real world? The problem is hiring managers often fall back on picking people who are similar to them or the existing team. This study tests if a short informational nudge, like a quick read about this idea, can actually change how hiring managers evaluate candidates and who they choose to hire. And guess what? They found that giving a brief primer on culture at hiring did make a difference. People were less biased towards candidates who just fit in and more likely to pick the ones who brought something new. Scroll is an introduction scroll in today's fast-paced world. Companies need people who can come up with new ideas, solve tricky problems, and work well together. Diversity, meaning people with different viewpoints and ways of doing things, is key to this, but often the hiring process itself can accidentally filter out this valuable diversity. Why? Because when hiring managers are rushed or have too much to think about, they tend to pick candidates who remind them of themselves or the people already on the team. This is called hiring based on similarity. It's like choosing people for your sports team based on how well they can already do what your best players do, instead of looking for someone who can teach the team a new skill. This tendency is even built into some popular hiring theories that focus on person-organization fit, which often means finding someone who matches the company's existing values. The researchers here see a tension. The very tools we use to find the best fit might be the ones stopping us from getting the diverse talent we need for innovation. So what this study wanted to find out was pretty straightforward. Could a very quick informational boost, just one short article about this culture add idea, actually change how experienced hiring professionals think and make decisions? They created a scenario where participants would read a few articles about hiring. Some people got an article specifically introducing them to culture add hiring, while others got articles on different, unrelated hiring topics. Then they were asked to evaluate pairs of fictional job candidates for two product roles. The twist here is clever. They designed the candidates and company contexts so that culture add and culture fit weren't fixed traits of a candidate, but rather depended on the specific team's culture. So, a candidate described as collaborative might be culture fit for a collaborative team, but culture add for an innovative team. This way, they could be sure any differences in how people rated candidates were due to how well they understood complementarity, not just a preference for one type of person. They had two main predictions. First, they thought people who read the culture add article would rate those candidates higher compared to the culture fit candidates, and this difference would be bigger than in the group that didn't get the article. Second, they predicted that the group that read about culture add would be more likely to actually choose the culture add candidate for hire. To test this, they got 264 working professionals who had experience with hiring. These folks were recruited online. They were randomly split into two groups. One group, the intervention group, received a short article explaining the concept of culture add hiring. The other group, the control group, got articles about other hiring topics, like how to conduct video interviews. Everyone read 3 short articles overall. Then all participants were shown descriptions of a hypothetical tech company and asked to imagine themselves as a hiring manager. They were presented with pairs of candidates for 2 different product roles, a product manager and a product designer for each pair. They had to rate each candidate's hireability on a scale of 1 to 10 and then make a choice. Which candidate would they actually hire? This setup, using these made-up scenarios and candidate profiles, is called a Vignette experiment. It allows researchers to control for a lot of variables and really focus on the impact of the information they provide. They made sure the candidates within each pair were as similar as possible, except for their behavioral style, which was designated as either culture fit or culture add, depending on the company context. Before we get to the exciting results, they did check if people actually paid attention to the articles. They asked participants to rate how well they understood each article and how relevant it was to their work. The good news is, the groups didn't really differ in how much they engaged with the articles that were the same for everyone. And for those in the intervention group, they found the culture. Ad article to be pretty understandable and relevant, which is great because it means the information was accessible and potentially useful. Now for the big findings. In the group that didn't get the culture ad article, the control group, something interesting happened. As expected, they consistently rated candidates who were described as culture fit significantly higher than those described as culture ad. This makes sense, they defaulted to similarity, but in the group that did read the culture ad article, something shifted. While culture fit candidates were still rated slightly higher on average, the gap between the ratings for culture fit and culture ad candidates was dramatically smaller. The study authors explained that this narrowing was mostly because the culture ad candidates were rated higher in the intervention group. The ratings for culture fit candidates barely changed. This directly supports their first hypothesis. The informational nudge reduced the advantage that culture fit candidates typically had. Looking at the statistics, the condition candidate type interaction was significant. This means the effect of being a culture AD candidate on hireability ratings depended on whether participants had read the culture AD article. Specifically, the tendency to rate culture fit candidates higher was significantly less pronounced in the intervention group. The researchers put it this way: the advantage for a culture fit candidate went from being about 0.7 points on a 10-point scale in the control group down to just about 0.20 points in the intervention group. That is a substantial reduction in bias driven by people being more open to the culture ad candidates. This figure visually shows that difference. You can see the clear gap between culture fit and culture ad ratings in the control group. Then, in the intervention group, those gaps shrink considerably, especially because the culture ad ratings go up. This suggests that learning about culture ad ratings go up. Ad thinking made people more willing to see the value in candidates who were different from the presumed norm of the team. But what about actual hiring decisions? Ratings are one thing, but would it translate to choosing someone? The answer is yes. When it came to making a forced choice between hiring the culture ad candidate or the culture fit candidate, those who received the culture ad article were significantly more likely to choose the culture ad candidate. In the control group, only about 35% of the hiring decisions favored the culture ad candidate. However, in the intervention group, that number jumped to 47%. That is a 12 percentage point increase, which is quite substantial in hiring research. The odds of choosing the culture ad candidate were 64% higher after just reading that one article. This strongly supports their second hypothesis. The intervention not only influenced ratings, but also actual selection decisions. This figure clearly illustrates that jump. The blue bar representing the intervention group is noticeably higher than the gray bar for the control group, showing a clear increase in culture AD candidate selection. They also looked to see if things like how much hiring experience someone had made a difference. For the most part, this brief intervention seemed to work across different levels of experience. While there were some hints that maybe more experienced hiring professionals might be even more influenced, it wasn't a consistent or strong enough effect to be certain without more research. They also did some extra checks to make sure their results weren't just a fluke of how they analyzed the data, and the main findings held up. So, what does all this mean? This study offers some really important initial evidence. It shows that complementary person-environment fit, that idea of bringing something new to the team, can indeed be applied to behavioral attributes, and not just technical skills. And crucially, it demonstrates that a simple informational intervention, like reading a short article, can influence how hiring managers evaluate candidates and who they decide to hire. This is a big deal because it bridges the gap between the practical concept of culture ad, that is talked about a lot in companies, and the academic research on fit. For anyone involved in hiring, these findings are quite actionable. They suggest that a lack of awareness and not having the culture ad concept readily in mind might be the biggest barriers to hiring for diversity of thought and behavior. If hiring managers aren't actively thinking about complementarity, they'll likely fall back on what is familiar. A brief briefing before they start evaluating candidates might be enough to make a difference. It is especially encouraging that this wasn't just about changing attitudes on paper. It actually shifted selection decisions. This is crucial because many diversity training programs have shown positive attitudinal changes, but not always a change in behavior. This study, with its very lightweight intervention, shows a tangible impact on hiring choices, suggesting similar approaches could be useful in real workplaces. Now, like any study, this one has its limitations. The intervention was short and given right before the evaluation task. We don't know how long the effect lasts. Would someone still be thinking about culture at a week later or even a day later? Also, the study was done with hypothetical candidates and companies. Real-world hiring involves a lot more pressure, team dynamics, and politics. Future research should look at whether these effects hold up in actual workplaces and over longer periods. They also noted that the participant sample was mostly male and from manufacturing and technology industries, so it would be important to see if these findings apply to more diverse groups of people and industries. In conclusion, this research provides a compelling glimpse into how we can foster more innovative and resilient workplaces. It shows that a simple informational intervention can shift experienced hiring professionals towards valuing culture, AD candidates more, leading to a significant increase in the likelihood of hiring someone who brings fresh perspectives. This suggests that lightweight, scalable interventions might be a practical way to achieve what many organizations aspire to, hiring for true added value, not just sameness. It's a great reminder that even small nudges in how we think about things can have a real impact on our decisions. What are your thoughts on culture ad hiring? Have you seen it in practice? Or perhaps experienced it yourself as a candidate? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this episode insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology and how it affects our lives. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.